Draft grades are far from a new concept on YouTube when it comes to NFL content. There's plenty of people out there who dedicate a channel to a specific team and will talk about each individual pick in depth, or they'll talk about the draft class at whole in depth. There's plenty of people out there who cover the league at large, such as myself, that will go division by division or conference by conference or talk about the draft in one big video. But you never see anybody talk about each individual team in their own draft grades video. All 32 teams, 32 videos. You never see that happen until now. Because I was disappointed with the pre draft content I was able to put out, because as a college student, free time is a luxury that I don't always have, I have decided to make up for it by making 32 videos throughout the month of May talking about my thoughts on all 32 teams' drafts. And I'm really excited to get into this. Keep in mind, as per usual with draft grades videos, I know that I'm going to be wrong on most of these, primarily because we haven't seen these guys play. We don't know how they're going to be developed, all of that good stuff. This is just my analysis based upon how I graded different players leading into the draft. You know, if I think a guy was overdrafted based on my evaluations, underdrafted, et cetera, et cetera. That's what these grades are based off of. I also don't think I'm better than any NFL GM out there. I'm just a 21-year-old college kid who spends the little free time he has watching film. So bear with me. People seem to like my opinions on this kind of stuff. I like sharing it, so I'm going to continue to do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Minnesota Vikings and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. The Vikings have a bit of an interesting class this year. I feel like I've said that to open up each one of these videos, but I suppose in their own way, every single draft class is a bit interesting. But in the Vikings case, they had 2 picks on the first night of the draft at 10 and 17 after trading. Obviously, and we'll talk about that. They didn't have anything on day 2. Then on day 3, they had 1 4th-round pick before picking 4 times in the last 2 rounds. So let's go ahead and dive into those first-round picks, starting out with J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback out of Michigan. They trade up 1 spot with the New York Jets, give up a couple day 3 picks to move up this 1 spot, and they land, what should be their quarterback of the future. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you I wasn't blown away by McCarthy. I feel like that's kind of the consensus. I know he had one of those rises that a lot of people want to say is superficial. He had a couple good interviews, and all of a sudden the national media started talking about him more, and everyone was like, wait a minute, this guy who wasn't actually a good quarterback is getting talked about a lot. That must mean he's good. A lot of people think McCarthy was that. I disagree. I think the thing with McCarthy is people get so obsessed with the idea of what he can be. And that's why we were starting to see rumors of like Washington's considering him at 2. The Vikings are going to trade 3 first-round picks to move up to 4 and get him. The Giants are going to take him at 5 if he falls, things like that. It's 6. The Chargers were picking at 5. But the point I'm trying to make here is I don't think McCarthy's a bad quarterback by any means. I think he's raw. I think McCarthy ideally would have stayed another year in college, at least in my opinion, right? If I was in McCarthy's ear talking about like his development, his best chance to start day 1 in the NFL, I would have told him to wait another year in college, just because I feel like, especially that last year at Michigan where he was just kind of handing the ball off every play, there's a lot of room to grow. However, after winning a natty and Jim Harbaugh leaving to go to the NFL, I absolutely get not wanting to stick around. In the eyes of people who care about college wins and things like that, I don't. I couldn't care less. But in the eyes of people who do care about that kind of stuff or care about narratives and things like that, this is probably the highest McCarthy's draft stock would have been. So I get it. Like I said, I personally would have wanted him to stay another year, but I get it. You've got a quarterback who has, I don't want to say the it factor because that's such an overplayed term, but he has the spunk you want from a franchise quarterback, right? He has those plays where it's 3rd and long when Michigan rarely got into 3rd and long, where he's going to do whatever he can to get the ball downfield, right? He's not a game manager. I've seen that term thrown around a little bit for him, seen some Brock Purdy comps. I don't see that. I think he's much more of a raw gunslinger. Now, his arm isn't as strong as like a Josh Allen's coming out, so it's not the same type of gunslinger, but he's not afraid to let that thing fly. When he was given the opportunities to, he really was willing to push the ball downfield. And to his credit, in his senior year, a lot of things did improve. his pocket presence, his ability to read the field, his poise, things like that. All of like the almost intangible things for a quarterback, or not the intangible, excuse me, the mental processing for a quarterback really improved. Now, is it perfect? No, there's still some issues. For example, with his processing, there's going to be a lot of plays where he's going to get stuck on his first read, and maybe that was a offense thing. Maybe Michigan didn't want to get him off that first read often, but there were plays where he was throwing contested balls into drags and out routes and things like that, and you don't want that under any circumstances. So I can't imagine they were coaching him to do that, but maybe in some cases, maybe it's a case by case basis thing. But the point I'm trying to make here is McCarthy's raw, and not having to give up a ton to go up and get him. They gave up much less than what was expected. Because like I said, there were a lot of people that thought Minnesota was going to have to trade 3 first-round picks, 2 this year, 1 next year, whatever it might have been, to go up and get a quarterback, whether that be McCarthy, May, Jaden Daniels, whatever quarterback you thought they were going to take. And I will say, as a Bears fan, I'm happy they didn't end up with Drake May. That'll be my one selfish jab at the Vikings. I'm really glad they didn't end up with Drake May. But I'd be lying if I thought it was smooth sailing for the rest of the NFC North if JJ McCarthy can develop. Because I really do think he has the traits, he has the ability to grow. And when you put him in a situation where he's got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, a good offensive line with one of the best tackle duos in football. They just added Aaron Jones. They have CJ Ham, who's a great pass-catching fullback. You have the coaching staff, obviously, with Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown. Like, it is a very QB-friendly environment in Minnesota. And the other side of the ball, too, I mean, the defense with Brian Flores looked great last year. They got some big upgrades, and we'll talk about 2 of them here in a second. So there's a really good quarterback-friendly environment. One might argue that Minnesota had a better environment for a quarterback than Chicago, and as a Bears fan, I might be inclined to agree, just because of the coaching staff and knowing what they are, especially looking at what Kevin O'Connell did with Josh Dobbs last year. You can tell he knows what he's doing. Now, the beauty with this, too, is McCarthy isn't going to have to start day one. They have Sam Darnold, who isn't a superstar by any means, but I do think he's enough, just to keep you afloat. If Josh Dobbs was able to get some productive games in Minnesota and put Minnesota within range of winning and helping them win a game or 2. I don't remember how many games Dobbs started for Minnesota. That feels like a lifetime ago. But the point is, they got good football out of Josh Dobbs. If they got good football out of him, I'm sure they can get good football out of Sam Darnold with a full offseason to work with him. Now, if McCarthy gets put out there this year, we'll see. I don't think it'll happen, and if it does, it won't be until late. I think if they put McCarthy out there, it would be Minnesota towards the end of the year waving the white flag if everything went wrong, or if Darnold just looked terrible, which I don't see happening either. So I've been talking for 6 minutes about just JJ McCarthy. I like the pick. I think it's a good pick. Big reason why it's graded so highly for me, on top of thinking McCarthy is a solid developmental quarterback, is also because of them not having to give up a bunch of assets to go up and get him. Now, a player they had to give up a little bit more in terms of assets to go up and get is Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. They had to trade away some future picks, mortgaging their, I think it was a 3rd and a 4th they gave up to go up and get Turner, 3rd and a 4th next year. And that's, I'm not going to say a lot, but it is a decent chunk of change considering what they had to give up to get up to 23 in the first place. So they're going to be hurting for draft picks on day 2 again next year, but I do think Turner is worth it. Now, the reason this is an A- and not an A or an A+ is because I do think just the situation of mortgaging that much in the future is not ideal. But plus, he wasn't my top edge on the board. I almost forgot Jared Verse went a pick or 2 later. I like Jared Verse a little bit more. I also had Latu ahead of him. Latu obviously went beforehand. He was the first defender off the board. But I thought those 3 were great edge rushers. I had a slightly lower grade on Turner than Latu and Verse. So I can't say this is like a home run pick, but I do think it's a very good pick for Minnesota. And in Turner, you're getting somebody who, he's a little bit of a developmental player. I'm not going to say that he is perfect. I'm not going to say that, he is Will Anderson, for example, who I whiffed on horribly having him as my edge 2 last year. He is a little bit more of a work in progress, especially when it comes to having a plan when he attacks the quarterback as a pass rusher. It's very much just I'm athletic. We'll figure out the rest later. And that doesn't fly when you get to the NFL level. You need to work on that pass rushing plan a little bit. He has the tools. It's mostly just figuring out when to deploy how to attack different looks, things like that. Um, he's also a pretty inconsistent tackler, which is something I don't love. And I think he's somebody that could benefit from putting on a little bit of weight just to gain a little bit of functional strength to help out his anchor and his ability to, set the edge against the run. But otherwise, you've got a super athletic super athletic outside linebacker. They run a 3-4. You got a super athletic edge rusher that, has everything you want. He needs a little bit of work. He needs a little bit of refinement, but he does have like Brian Burns upside as a super athletic top tier edge. Scares me a little bit that Minnesota got him, I'm not going to lie, especially when you consider he's going to be paired with guys like Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. They have a very respectable rotation on the edge in Minnesota right now. Now, it doesn't make up for losing Danielle Hunter right away, but Dallas Turner absolutely has the upside to make up for Danielle Hunter. So you know what? I said, I introduced this as like an A- pick. I'm going to change it as I'm sitting here talking about it. I think I'm going to bump them up to an A. I think I'm overblowing what they had to give up. I think Dallas Turner is going to be awesome for them. It's just a matter of, again, figuring out that pass rushing tool belt. I still would have rather them go Jared Verse, but then again, I get it. Turner's a little bit younger. He's a little bit more athletic. It's a preference thing, really. At that point, I'm being picky, and I don't want to be biased. I don't want to nitpick just to nitpick to lower the Vikings grade. So I like the Turner pick. And then we move on to day 3. Again, no day 2 picks. On day 3, first pick, they go out and get Kyrie Jackson, the corner out of Oregon. And I like Jackson quite a bit. You've got a 6'4" corner, weighs in at just under 200 pounds. Very fluid, great ball skills, really good at mirroring wide receivers and being able to keep up with them. He has a lot of aggression in him. He's a physical, willing run defender. He's very aggressive at the catch point, very disciplined eyes. He's got really powerful strikes and like press man coverage. Now, he's a little bit on the older side, and his hips are a little bit I don't want to say they're stiff, but it's almost like they're delayed. Like his hips react slower than the rest of his body, which hurts his ability to change directions, hurts how twitchy he is as an athlete. I get like souped up Akello Witherspoon vibes from him, if that makes sense. I think at worst he'll be a Witherspoon level corner, which is just like a reliable 3. But I do think there's a world where Kyrie Jackson kind of rises above that and is able to, be a pretty productive corner out there. So I like that pick a decent bit. And then we move on into the 6th round, first of 2 picks here. They take Walter Roos, the offensive lineman out of Oklahoma. And I'm going to tell you outright, I didn't love Walter Roos. I graded 20 offensive tackles, and he ended up being number 19. Now, I did have a late 5th round grade on him, so this is at least decent value. He's somebody that he's got the discipline and he's got the polish. I just don't know how he's going to stack up at the next level athletically and physically, just because he really doesn't have any play strength to write home about, and he is one of the least athletic tackles in this class. So, he's got the effort and the hustle and the intensity and the leg drive and, the technique, his hand placement's good. His eye discipline in terms of just being able to like locate somebody in the run game and lock on and things like that. That's all really good. But at a certain point, you got to have a baseline of athletic tools to be a successful offensive lineman. And I don't know if Roos has that. Now, granted, he's going to be a swing tackle for you, so it doesn't matter too much. Obviously, you have one of the best, if not the best, tackle duo in the league right now with Darisaw and Brian O'Neill, so it is what it is. You're just taking an offensive lineman in the 6th round, so that's fine enough. I think he's a good backup. Not great, but good enough. And then also in the 6th round, they take Will Reichard, the kicker out of Alabama, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not a huge fan of drafting kickers and punters. We see historically how poorly that has played out, but it's the 6th round. I can't give them too much crap for it. I can't sit here and say that this is throwing away a draft pick, anything like that. It's Minnesota. They're always going to have kicker problems. They've always had kicker problems. I understand taking a swing here. Now, I don't scout kickers, so I don't know if Reichard was the best on the board, the worst on the board, what he was. To my understanding, though, he's one of those guys that's more accurate than he is strong. You know, he doesn't have a lot of oomph behind his kicks. So if that's true, which I'm just going to assume it is, because again, I don't watch kickers. I can't sit here and say that I'm a Will Reichard expert. I'm going to give them a B- for it just because of, you know, it being the 6th round. And also, I give the Bears a B+ for drafting a punter. Granted, Torrey Taylor's like a generational punter, but I don't want to be a dick and give the Vikings like a D for drafting a kicker when the Bears drafted a punter 2 rounds earlier, or give them, you know, a really bad grade. I gave them 2 steps down, you know, a B-. I think that's fair. When you have limited picks, I don't love spending one of them on a kicker, but again, it's the 6th round. I can't get too upset. And then in the 7th round, the first of their 2 picks, they take Michael Juergens, the offensive lineman out of Wake Forest. In short, you know, just another backup offensive lineman who, you know, he has experience. You know, he was a solid starter for 3 years, played center, played guard, but just nothing to write home about. Nothing crazy to write home about. He's got below average core strength. He's going to get uprooted on plays because of that. You know, he gets bounced backward by like bull rushes. He doesn't handle the strength aspect of things super great. Now, he's very good at like help blocking, if that makes sense, like on double teams, or in pass pro jumping over to a double team, or just finding work. Like, he's smart and he's got a little bit of instincts. He's a backup lineman in the 7th round. It is what it is, right? You know, I can't complain about this. So I think a B is fitting. And then Levi Drake Rodriguez, I'm not going to lie to you. I did not watch this guy. I had never heard of this guy before the draft. I wasn't able to get my hands on any tape after the draft, because guys like Juergens, for example, I went back and watched a little bit of him to prep myself for this video. Levi Drake Rodriguez, nothing. I got nada. So I'm going to give them an NA. I'm not going to grade a pick that I just straight up don't know anything about. You know, it's fine process. It's the end of the 7th round. You know, it is what it is. If he's bad, who cares? If he's good, awesome. But I don't know. I don't have anything to say. But as a whole, I struggled coming up with a grade for this one, just because they're so limited on the picks that, like, I don't want to say actually matter, because every pick matters. You know, all of these guys have the chance to make a difference on the team. But typically when we're talking about picks that are going to make a big impact, picks that like really, really matter, we're talking maybe through the 4th round. Maybe. And they only had 3 picks there. I think they did a damn fine job on all 3 of those picks. McCarthy and Turner both getting A's from me. Kyrie Jackson giving them an A- there. You know, those are good grades for those 3 picks. And then Walter Roos, Will Reichard, Cam Juergens, Levi Drake Rodriguez. I'm not going to kill their grade for not knocking 6th and 7th round picks out of the park. I think they did a fine enough job. So I'm going to give them an A. I think they did a really, really solid job with limited capital. You got at least one guy that has the potential, or one guy that I don't want to say has the potential, but just probably will be a game wrecker, or at least a certified stud on defense, in Dallas Turner. You get JJ McCarthy, who could potentially be your franchise quarterback if the development goes well. And Kyrie Jackson, if nothing else, is going to be fun to watch in a Brian Flores scheme where he's able to play really aggressive. So I do think Kwesi cooked, as much as I hate to admit it as a fan of the Bears. I really do think the Vikings had a damn good draft, as with the rest of the NFC North.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that